Welcome to the Regeneration podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Griggs. Visit www.theregeneration.co to learn more. And today alongside me, I have Kevin from Perennial Pastures. Thank you for joining me.
Good to be here, man.
So I guess to really get started, I know it's kind of a basic question, but what was the impetus behind starting Perennial Pastures?
So, let's see, kind of a long journey, but I've been involved in the regenerative agriculture industry for about 10 years now. And started for me really as an athlete. I played baseball in college and was really into eating paleo diet and got really into grass-fed, grass-finished beef, trying to fuel myself for the best performance possible. And got really into our food system. Then after college, took some permaculture courses, and then really wanted to do regeneration at scale. And that's what led me to ranching. I feel like ranching is our best opportunity and best lever that we can pull to heal land as fast as possible globally. And so was very blessed to work with some great minds in the industry. One being Roger Savory, son of Alan Savory, got exposed to a lot of those methods right off the bat from my first get-go. So really, I think the impetus behind starting Perennial Pastures, which I started in 2020, was really to just do this for myself. I'd worked for a lot of guys that were pioneers in the industry, and I wanted to kind of combine all of their knowledge bases into one single company, and that is what we have going on right now. So we're a vertically integrated regenerative ranching operation. We do the production side as well as the marketing. Perennial Pastures is the marketing side, but we also have a land management business too called Landscape Function Management. So we have a huge passion for that, and really our mission statement is enrich life by restoring connections, healing land, and nourishing people. So that's the mission that we're on, and that was kind of the whole goal behind it was to heal land and people at the same time.
I love that, especially the mission. I mean, I obviously highly align with that, with my brand and wanting to I guess push a similar message. On your comment about ranching and how you chose that for the quickest and best way for regeneration of the land and soil, could you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, so you could change one ranch and affect a large area of land. Ranches represent some very large land bases in the world. We have pretty large ranches here in the western U.S. There's large ranches in Australia, other parts of the globe. And so you can make one small shift with, let's say, a 1,000,000-acre ranch, and all you got to do is convert one mine to this way of management, and that's a lot of land that you've converted and made healthier. Whereas, let's say, comparatively, you have to convince 1,000,000 1-acre homesteads to do permaculture to convert the same amount of land that's over, that you could with just one ranch. So again, I think it's just an issue of scale and how many minds that we have to change, because it is a complete mindset shift from kind of conventional thinking to holistic regenerative thinking. So ranchers are, I think, going to be the fastest way to do that. You could do it with farmland, but farmland's a lot smaller than ranches too. If you just look at the average size, but yeah, so a lot of potential there.
So there's two questions I had with that. On the topic, you mentioned the difference between ranch and farmland. For the listeners that might not understand that, could you just, I guess, help educate on the differences for that?
Yeah, ranching's livestock based, and farming is more crop based. You think of corn and soybean farm in the Midwest. There's more farm ground there, and a ranch, could be a 10,000-acre piece of grassland that necessarily isn't probably suitable for cropping, just because maybe it's drier. But that's kind of a general description. There's probably some better ones out there, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah. And then on the topic of scaling too, because I know that I see headlines all the time about that. I see and hear folks that are against animal agriculture about how regenerative agriculture cannot scale and it's not realistic. So I'd just love to hear your thoughts on, because because you have started in 2020 and have grown really quickly. So I'd love to hear just what you would say whenever you hear things like that, that agriculture and regenerative agriculture specifically cannot scale, and especially with animals.
Yeah, I would say you're not thinking about it right if you have a mindset like that. Anything that inherently mimics nature can scale just to the bounds of to the boundaries of the planet and its capabilities. Ranching in particular, because you can run a lot of livestock units per full time equivalent of employees. I still don't think we know the upper bounds of that. The best I've heard is running a herd of 5,000 head from two full time equivalents. That's the best I've heard in Australia by the Coghlan family there in southern Australia. But I think we could do better than that, even probably. So yeah, it's a good question. We can definitely feed the world that way. We can produce more nutrient dense food through regenerative agriculture and ranching in particular, because there's so much land that's not suitable for crops. It can definitely scale, and if people are starting to eat more of a animal based diet, getting the majority of their staple foods from proteins and fats and meat and milk, we can feed way more people than we can through annual agriculture or corn and soybean farming, which is a lot of what we do now.
Agreed. And on top of, you feel way more nourished eating meat and milk than corn and soy. Transitioning a little bit to, because you also mentioning the marketing and land pieces. At the start, when you started in 2020, I guess what was that like, and how did you, I guess, game plan everything to start? Especially now, it's 4 years later, and you've been able to again scale and expand rather quickly.
Well, it wasn't my first rodeo, so to speak. I've done a few different businesses in my lifetime. I started my first business in 2012, I believe, and actually 2023. And so I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole life. So I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do when I first started this. Still been a very steep learning curve and will continue to be, because when you're managing complexity in nature, there's always new things that you can learn. But I had a pretty good idea and good vision of what I wanted to do, which was a vertically integrated, direct to consumer regenerative ranching business. Spent a lot of time going out and looking at other operations and other folks that have gone before me that have been successful or not successful, and just try to learn as much as I could from them and put that into my business model for this operation. So I did a ton of research, and I think that's crucial before going out and doing something. But failure is also a good teacher, and I've failed a lot before as well in my career. But as long as you don't give up, you're never really a true complete failure. So you just got to keep pushing ahead and not give up.
With that in marketing in particular, because whenever I worked on a farm in rural Pennsylvania, and since talking to more farms and then just doing my own online research, the marketing of a farm and ranch is all over the place for a lot of folks, because it's also a business. And so a lot of folks, they just want to farm and do the work, but they're not necessarily business minded and might not do the best at marketing essentially what they're selling. And so I'd just love to hear, with everything you're doing from that marketing portion, and if you have any recommendations for just people from a marketing standpoint, because again, it's so noticeable, especially in the super rural areas, that in particular can be really lacking.
There's so much to learn on the marketing side. I'm still learning every single day, but it's important to just tell a good story, and have a good, a real, kind of like a good vision, a good genesis, like a good core story, I guess you could say. Mine is, first generation rancher, get involved in ranching. But there's so many good stories to tell in agriculture, whether you're a fifth generation farming family, whether you're doing something different, just trying to highlight that. I think the importance of good creative is really important too. Brainstorming stuff that's funny or has really good educational content. So many things you can do now with infographics and video to really kind of get through to people and explain some of the complexity that we're doing on these landscapes. And then there's just a lot of good data that we have to market too, whether it's like the nutrient density in the food or their transparency through video of the livestock that we are managing. there's a lot to market. So it's kind of a marketer's dream, to be honest. This regenerative ranching space. There's so many positive stories that we can focus on. It's very action orientated too, so you can really emphasize that, which I think in today's society there's so much negativity going on and not a lot of positive solutions. So that's one of the beauties of regenerative agriculture from a marketing perspective is we can really promote that and be very positive with our story. Certainly, there's a lot of good websites too. Like we're on Shopify, which makes it very easy to market our products. There's a lot of other farm specific websites that are popping up too. So I think it's never been easier to kind of go out and own the customer and have an e-commerce business. It's just there's a lot to know, so you got to kind of take it step by step. But hopefully, more and more folks do it because I think the more people we can get connected directly with their farmers and ranchers, the better off this country is going to be.
I agree. And then I know with you being direct to consumer, selling portions of the cow, quarter, half, etc. Do you take pre-orders, or what's that like? To where you make the announcement that you're not taking them, and then how long does that process take before, say, you ship out those orders?
We're running at like a 3 to 4 month time frame right now between deposit to fulfillment. So it's not the shortest, but we're not the longest, and we're trying to get better on that. I'd like to be more at like 2 to 3 months, but right now, just with all the interest we've had, we're kind of more at the 3 to 4 month time frame.
Because I don't know, I guess in terms of just the time difference, why would you want to just get to the 2 to 3 months versus the 3 to 4 months? I guess I can't see the huge changes that would happen on your end.
Well, you collect the second half deposit of cash quicker. Yeah, so it accelerates your cash conversion cycle, which is pretty important for any business.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. um, and then the second part, going back to whenever you mentioned the marketing, and then you said the land management piece. Yeah, can you just dive into that and explain what you do with all that?
Sure, there's a lot that goes into it, but at its simplest state, we're mimicking nature with the herd. So we're trying to get high density grazing, a lot of hoof action, seed germination through that hoof action, and dung and urine disbursement across most of the ranch. And then after that, high density grazing event with a high utilization occurring too, where we're clearing the growth points on grasses and pushing the litter into the ground. We allow for the appropriate recovery of perennial grasses. So we just like to start with a good infrastructure layer of water and wire, whether it's high tensile or polywire, and planning the ranch out in a way that's going to make it very easy to graze in this method. For some of the areas on our ranch that are very steep or brushy, where it might not make sense to do as much polywire fencing, we can do herding and use horses to move the cattle to achieve that density. They do a lot of this on foot in Africa. They have very good herders there and other parts of the world. So we think the combination of polywire fence, the horse, and then the three levers of grazing, utilization, stock density, and recovery are the main drivers to doing this well.
How do you know, for example, for like the recovery part? I'm assuming this is all whenever you're planning ahead of time. How do you figure out, I guess, just how long and how this in terms of stock density before rotating and letting that certain paddock recover?
We plan our recoveries out for, in our area it's up to 18 months, but it's just what it's the it means that the perennial grass is fully recovered. And how do we know that? We know that by there's fresh yellow litter in the base of the plant. We know that its root system is fully recovered at that point. So we time our recovery periods on that, and then we just, given the slope and area of the ranch, we try to get as much density as we can. Some areas are easier to get density than others, uh, but it's important to get that density and then plan for those recoveries. And if you're getting that and hitting stuff really hard, this often means like 4 to 8 moves per day. Then you're going to start stimulating a lot of native perennial grass species, and that's really the goal. It's why we call ourselves perennial pastures, is we want to be perennial grass anchored in the landscape with still a lot of biodiversity, but perenniality for us is the most important to start, and then biodiversity after that.
I don't know if this is the right question to ask, but in the 4 year time frame, I guess what would be some of the biggest differences you've noticed in the land since starting?
We've hit areas of the ranch. We don't have a ton of paddocks built quite yet, but when we first started, it was just one big 8,000 acre paddock on one of our leases. So we've hit areas of the ranch that haven't had a footprint on it in quite some time. And so breaking up that soil crust on areas that haven't been impacted for a while has has allowed us to like have really good germination events. So probably just that to start has been the biggest impact that we've seen. Um, we do have some good, decent recoveries right now too, but this year will be the first year we really ramp it up and do more serious high density grazing. It's been a lot of work and hundreds of thousands of dollars in infrastructure investment to kind of get to the point where we're at now. But we feel like this will be the first big year that we really go for it on the density and utilization side of things.
And then with you were mentioning with just the animal hoof impact with the seed germination, because again, it's going back to how there's just all kinds of articles and talk online about animal agriculture causing climate change, but through regenerative agriculture and ranches such as yourself, it's just not true. So if you could just talk more on just the importance of having animals on these lands and the animal actual impact they have on the land, how that improves the soil and therefore the grass and therefore for the cows and then lastly for us. Yeah, I would love to if you could just talk more on that.
So in brittle ecosystems, cows are very, very important. Even in human landscapes, they are too. But especially important in brittle ecosystems, which have variable rainfall and are dry. The only human environment is the rumen of the ruminant, so the stomach of the cow or the stomach of the sheep or goat. It's literally the only place to break down carbon and return it back to the soil. Otherwise, if you just let grasses grow and remove all the animals, the fiber from the grasses would just oxidize in the sun, which also leads to desertification. So we need the impact of the animal in the dung and urine to fertilize the soil. We need the hoofs to push seeds into the soil and break up soil capping that occurs when raindrops hit bare ground and clay settles on the top. So we need to break that up with the hoofs, dung and urinate those areas, and then allow for appropriate recovery times for the grasses to establish. So they're really important, and you can definitely take bare ground and put it back to perennial grasses, and that's what we're trying to do on our ranches. We started with a decent amount of bare ground, and we hope to show, over a period of 5 years that we've brought it back to 80 to 90% perennials, and 100% ground cover is our goal. And so we're on our way there, and that launches that whole process of covering the ground with litter and getting perennial grasses to grow every foot is really a huge driver to soil health, because grasses are one of the ultimate healers of landscapes, as they can really inject a ton of carbon, photosynthate sugars, and lipids down into the soil, and that feeds the soil biology, which then creates soil aggregation. And once you have soil aggregation, you could start to have more advanced forms of soil biology. So the mycorrhizal fungi is a key first step on that, which creates that soil aggregates structure through various organic compounds, but a big one is glomalin. And so once you get that one going, you get that aggregate structure, and then the other things like protozoas, nematodes, and amoebas, and between those pore spaces. So that kind of in a nutshell is how this whole process works.
Whenever I first learned about the soil food web, that really blew my mind just how much is going on under the surface that you have no ideas happening. And then you think about conventional agriculture, specifically with tilling, and then how that's absolutely just destroying that microbiology going on. And it makes you, I don't know, for me, I started just having the hamster wheel spinning of just thinking about all of that and how it's so all interconnected. And here's regenerative agriculture that's works in harmonious with nature versus, again, with the tillage and all that, that's just completely against nature, and how those two respond. um, it's truly incredible, and that's why I try to educate as much as possible, because once you see that in person and pick up soil, and then like for example, I didn't realize that when you pick up soil and see earthworms, that's a really great sign, that you're doing something right and continuing that. Just little things like that that nature tells you, and I don't know, it's just really fascinating. And I know that you do a lot of ranch tours with education as well. And I'm assuming that you'd be talking about a lot of this stuff. So I'd just love to hear, um, yeah, if just you have any stories or anything on folks that are just visiting and just hearing and seeing how they react to all that. Because I think that's another reason why I push to for folks to take a weekend trip if the farms and ranches are having tours, to actually see that in person, because it's a lot different than just seeing it online.
Yeah, there's no substitute for going and actually shaking your rancher's hand and figuring out exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it, and just asking them a bunch of questions. And the more you can get educated on soil health, the more the more questions you're gonna have, and you're gonna be able to ask the right questions to your ranchers, and you'll be able to get a pretty good sense fairly quickly by doing a tour whether they're full of shit or not. And so um, it's my favorite part of what we do, just because it's fun to see the excitement in the customer's eyes and to have that personal relationship with them, because we're trying to cultivate lifelong customers here at Perennial Pastures. And so there's a huge possibility of that for us, just because if the quality's good, we got a relationship with them, they like us, we're part of the community, why not buy from us for a long time? As long as you consistently have good eating experiences, and you feel good after the food, there's a huge potential to have those lifelong customers in this business. So,
What are some questions you think folks should ask when they do visit a ranch?
um, how are you building soil? What practices are you doing to help accelerate that process? What is the organic matter of your soils? How do you treat your livestock? What humane practices do you put in place? How are you monitoring the progress of the regeneration on your land? Are you looking at percentage of bare ground? How many perennials do you have if they're a rancher? A lot of questions like that.
I like those, and I like the ones specifically with how you take care of the animals. Because me personally, I was a vegan for 2.5 years. Like most vegans, it was mainly because of factory farming and just not aware of all the other types of agriculture that is actually happening. And seeing the care that a lot of the farmers and ranchers have for their animals is, I'm definitely going to say, it's way more than the care that vegans have for animals. They're out there in the snow and in the middle of the night taking care of an animal, a sick animal. They'll sleep with them in the barn. I mean, I can personally vouch for a lot of the farmers that I've worked with, seeing how they operate and take care for their animals is very crucial. And then that you can also see the benefits from that as you take care of the animals. They're obviously far healthier too, less stressed, and then they're healthier for us as well. And then on top of that, too, the taste. Lastly, is it all plays into a big part of all that. And so I like that a lot, just because, again, when you're not on the farm and ranch yourself, you're assuming they're taking care of them, but you really can't until you really go on to the place and see for yourself.
Yeah, it's really important, and it just ties. everything in together when you're working the animals in a way that they want to be worked, and using low stress techniques, and it becomes kind of a symphony on top of the soil when you're it's especially fun on horseback, because when you get your horses dialed in, then you can really herd your cattle in a way and move them where you want to move them with the right density and utilization, and all that fun stuff. So yeah, it's a huge part about what we do, and a huge part about the industry too.
So to continue just the conversation with cows specifically, um, I know, are you all planning to do raw dairy?
Yes, we'd like to. We have a down payment on a mobile milking parlor, and we plan on getting 10 cows here probably sometime later this year.
Whenever you're planning for all that, what do you have to take into consideration, especially with how polarizing raw dairy is in America, and especially with what we're told from a lot of the institutions that we're supposed to trust, telling us that it should be illegal. It makes us sick. It kills us. That we should pasteurize. So I know there's a lot from even just the legislative portion of that. So yeah, I'd just be curious to hear that process into going into raw dairy.
It's probably the number one product that we get requested, obviously, other than our beef. So there's something really good going on in the U.S. today as regards to that, and I think people are just seeing a lot of health benefits from it, keeping the milk in its natural state. It's better education of the history of milk too, and why we went to pasteurization, and now why we're kind of coming back to raw. We have a good raw producer here in California. I've never been to his operation, but Mark McAfee and Raw Farm have done a lot to, I think, promote the benefits of it as well. So we have to thank the pioneers that have gone before us. We're excited to do things a little differently. We want to leave the calf on for a full weaning and call it, calf friendly milk, because a lot of these bigger producers still take the calves off, and let them get a day or two of colostrum, and then separate them, which we think is less natural, and doesn't exactly mimic nature in a lot of ways. And so we're excited to do that, and then the mobile milking will be interesting too, so that we don't have to have a central barn and location where we have to deal with a lot of the effluent. So we're excited to pioneer some newer things on top of, let's call it newer product, even though it's an older product, and even do more education around it. My wife and I are big raw milk drinkers. My son is growing up on it. He's 2 years old and has had nothing but raw milk in his life. So we're big proponents of it here in our house, and I know our whole team here at Perennial Pastures is, when we get together for team functions and dinners, uh, everybody wants a glass of raw milk, instead of like a glass of wine. So it's pretty funny that way. So I have to have extra on hand for our team meetings.
That's awesome. I hope one day we get to the point to where you go to the store and when you ask for milk, it's raw milk, and then it's called pasteurized milk because it's completely backwards with the terminology on it. With the mobile milking station, is that are you just rotating the dairy cows and then just going with the mobile milking, or how does that work?
Yeah, the mobile parlor follows them, where oftentimes there's stationary parlors on most dairy ranches where the cows walk to the parlor. This one, the parlor follows the cows in the pasture, and so we're excited to see that in operation, because with the stationary milking systems, they're dung and urinating in those, and you got to have some sort of effluent treatment system. Whereas when you milk out in the pasture, they're just dung and urinating how they normally would out in the pasture. You don't have There's very little cleanup, if any at all. So we're excited to kind of see that as a potential lower input system because these mobile parlors are a lot cheaper than building a stationary system. Now, as we scale up, we might need to move to a stationary one with laneways walking back to the parlor. But right now, we're going to be at such a small scale that we want to make sure, we use the appropriate infrastructure to get that business going.
How just overall with continue to scale the cooperation and then doing raw dairy. I guess how do you figure out what to continue to scale and implement new, um, I guess, sales channels like the raw dairy?
Well, raw dairy, we want to do that just because we've gotten a lot of requests on it from the 16 farmers markets that we're in. But we determine how to scale enterprises based on how profitable they are. So you look at the gross profit of the enterprise, the revenue minus the direct costs. And if you have some good gross profit in there, you're going to want to just keep doing more of that. So more and more land and more cattle. And there's not a ton of businesses that, as you get bigger, the gross profit stays the same or gets better. So uh, we're excited. We think the cattle and the the lamb and all the herbivores can scale pretty well. The omnivores, the chicken and pigs, are a little bit tougher just because they're dependent more on the grain system, just because they're omnivores, and that's a tougher system from an input basis than just the purely grass-fed animals.
For the pigs and chickens, because also with just corn and soy, how much that's so available. And then the farm I used to work on, and pretty much all the farms around a lot of the rural areas I've visited, it's very heavy corn and soy based feed. Um, yeah, because that's all the chickens feed. Whenever we were there, it was just corn and soy. I guess for folks that want to do chickens or pigs, do you have any advice for going about just the feed of that? Because I know, like you said, it is the challenge versus just straight herbivores.
We don't raise any chicken or pigs ourselves right now. We're buying from a guy, Tyler Dolly, out of Northern California, Big Bluff Ranch, on the chickens, and then we don't sell any pork currently, but we want to. Again, coming back to the more natural, you can get more labor. You can reduce too helps. Uh, so with the pigs, we want to range them under oak trees and finish them on acorns. So if you have them in a nice silvo pasture system, they can eat the mast, whether it's acorns or mulberries or chestnuts. If you're in the case of Mark Shepard and hazelnuts, so that certainly helps out with the economics and reducing the feed bill for both pigs and chickens. Um, on the chicken side of things, if you could have like mobile coops that are automated, probably reduce a lot of your labor costs. I think the labor cost is pretty high on those operations. So um, little things like that, I think, are ways that you can eke out some more profit on the omnivore based operations.
Wanted to transition a little bit just on again the 4 years you've worked with Perennial Pastures on, like you said, on the failures too a lot. If there's a certain, I guess, failure or story that you have that you could share on that, to where for folks that are going into this as first generational ranchers themselves, that you wish you would have, I guess, done better. I don't know if that's the best phrasing for that, but because I agree on the topic of failures, you learn a lot, and that's just the best way to learn a lot for yourself, is to just essentially do it. But if there's a story that you have to where you wish you could have done it better or more efficiently at the beginning, I think that'd be great to hear.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think hiring more finance people early on to have your books in order is crucial, just so you can have better decision making abilities as you try to scale. Um, I don't know. In the current operation, there's not a whole lot that I would do differently. Perhaps try to acquire the best knowledge that's out there right off the bat versus just kind of going with somebody that's local in terms of call it fencing or infrastructure development. You can waste a lot of money on infrastructure development. So making sure you get that whole layer right with ranching is pretty important. And you want it to be low cost but effective. So those are two things, financial books and then smart infrastructure development at a good cost that I would emphasize just based on my experience.
In terms of the fencing infrastructure, how did you figure out what to go with that? Because again, going back to the farm I worked on, he had certain paddocks set up on one side of the farm, but then on the other side, it was just a lot of putting together just the tinsel wire. And then he eventually had somebody place a completely brand new fence around, and it ended up costing way more money than the initial quote. And still, some of the animals were able to escape. And so I know, like you're mentioning, it can be very costly and still might not work, and the animals will still escape. How did you go and figure out what you did for yours?
I talked to a lot of people and just did a lot of research and a little bit of trial and error too. But yeah, it's a combo of like barbed wire at the boundaries and then high tensile for some larger paddocks and then poly wire for a lot of the strip grazing. But it's been an evolution, and there's other tools that come out that make it easier to to do it at scale and efficiently. So just working with some of those tools, excuse me, and making sure that we are using the best and most innovative tools that are out there.
The last question I had is just on the topic of the fact that the average age of the farmer and rancher is, I mean, it changes, but it seems to be somewhere around 60. Most don't have an heir for the land that they have. I know I'm noticing more and more and more people are definitely waking up to what's happened to our food system and realizing, like myself, how disconnected we've been with our food. With the crazy amount of land that's about to exchange hands to potential folks that aren't even interested in agriculture, how can we go about just that massive um, problem essentially that's happening in America with that?
Education, more training. There's a lot of folks that are doing good stuff out there, understanding ag, and a lot of the pioneers have many educational videos and courses that are out there. I think it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. Some of the fifth generation farmers and ranchers are going to have to learn how to innovate and break away from how things have been done. Some of the first gen folks are going to have to step in and step up to make things happen on the land too. We're going to have to figure out how to finance a lot of this and get capital into good entrepreneurs' hands that can help run real businesses on the land that provide for their families. But we're also going to have to fix a lot of the broader, call it ecosystem level things within our economy. If we can't get inflation under control and money printing, then it's going to kind of all be all for naught, if our currency's worth nothing and we can't buy stuff with it. Um, so there's a lot there, and I'd love to see a lot of this land transition over to really good family operators that are scaled up. You're seeing some of that, I think, in the farmland areas. A lot of the smaller, call it less innovative operations have been sold to the larger family operations that are good, really good at what they do. It has had an effect on rural America because a lot of these towns that had thousands of people in them only have hundreds of people in them. So you've seen a pretty large exodus into larger cities, which is okay in some respects. Um, it's a tough question. I mean, you gotta. There's a lot of factors that go into that, and how do we want our landscapes to be populated and structured? And I'd love to see more land transfer to private operators versus public. Public doesn't have a ton of incentive to actually make the land better, and in a lot of cases, I think groups like the BLM or um, Fish and Wildlife have made the land worse due to their policies, and they don't have much skin in the game to adjust. So yeah, it's a pretty complex topic actually when you start looking at land transformation and who's managing land and what's the ideal mix. And but I think it's never been easier to train yourself in this field and to start a regenerative agriculture business. And so I hope more and more people do that, follow their hearts, and get called back to the land.
With the investment topic too, that's something that I really hope to see, I guess, get bigger, especially for I'm a Bitcoiner myself, and there's a lot of overlap between that and food sovereignty and just self sovereignty essentially. But there will be a lot of people that want to support regenerative ag and farms and ranches near them, but they don't want to necessarily do the work themselves, but have some capital to where they can invest in businesses. I really hope to see that more and more. Because, for example, one of the very first documentaries I saw as I started learning about regenerative agriculture was The Biggest Little Farm. And I know for them, they had quite a bit of investment leading up to it, and that really helped them. And yeah, I just really hope to see more of that as time goes on.
Yes. Yeah. Same here. Me too.
Well, thank you, Kevin. That's all I have for me. I guess if you just want to plug anything to the listeners.
Yeah, you can go to our website, perennialpasturesranch.com, and we got beef, chicken, lamb, and a variety of merch that you can order from us right now online. And we're doing a free freezer promo as well. So for those folks that live closer in the Southwest, Western Arizona, Southern California, Las Vegas, and kind of more Central California as north as Santa Barbara. If you buy a half or whole cow, we give you a free freezer branded by Perennial Pastures and the whole deal. So that's something that we've been enjoying highlighting, and putting freezers in people's homes is a lot of fun. So
Yeah, that's very cool. I've actually never heard of that, so that's awesome.
yeah,
Well,
thanks,
thank you.
Ryan.
Visit www.theregeneissance.co to learn more.